Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you live from the headquarters of Greenpeace USA. This is the headquarters, right? Mm-hmm. and with me in the studio is Elizabeth Jardim, who is the USA IT sector campaigner. I think a lot of IT as in internet or as in information technologies. Right. A lot of people think Greenpeace and the environment, and they don't think information technology.
Right.
Tell us about this.
Yeah, so Greenpeace has actually had a tech sector campaign for a little over 10 years now. Back around 2006, 2007, we realized the growing problem of chemicals in electronic waste, and that's really how we initially started working with tech companies. The cool thing about tech companies is they are really leading innovation. So we notice a problem that they have in their production or their operations. We really expect them to be able to find the solutions to fix that. So we've been working on the tech sector for about 10 years.
So what are some of the solutions?
Right. So right now we're really focused on the consumption of resources and dirty energy. Like right now, all of us use our gadgets daily, all the time, and have many gadgets. So the production of these gadgets drives a lot of consumption of natural resources and dirty energy. And we're asking the tech sector to shift to designing gadgets that last longer, that are designed with recycled and recyclable materials, and also to use renewable energy to manufacture these products.
What kind of response are you getting?
Well, we are getting some response in that some companies are starting to make progress. So in October, we released the Guide to Greener Electronics that ranks 17 companies on the different areas we're concerned about, looking at energy use, resource consumption. And they weren't all Fs. That's we were happy to see. There's definitely still a lot of progress that needs to be made. But we feel like tech companies want to sort of race to improve. Like we saw this with the tech companies that operate data centers. After several years, we started to see companies like Apple, Facebook, and Google committing to power their data centers with 100% renewable energy, and they're steadily making progress on that. So now we're shifting beyond data centers to the supply chain, and there's still a lot of work to be done there. That's where a lot of the emissions lie. Apple has been the only company to make a commitment to power its supply chain with 100% renewable energy, but now that they've made that commitment, they're starting to enact it and showing the sector that it's possible.
Wow. That's great. Now it seems like, particularly in the last couple of years, now that I think the power of solar dropped like just 7% last year. I mean, it's becoming exponential. Or if you know the exact number, please, correct me. But my understanding is that as of right now, in most parts of the world, and certainly in most parts of the United States, renewable energy is actually less expensive than fossil fuel-based energy. And in some ways more reliable, although that's depends on how it's done. So that's just kind of a no-brainer, right? For the big tech companies, hey, you're running a data center and you're using 50 megawatts, build the windmills out or whatever. But when you're manufacturing a chip and you need some beryllium and you need some molybdenum, and where do you get these things? You get them from, in some cases, conflict places in Africa. Mm-hmm. The rare earth mine in the United States was shut down because the Chinese were dumping those products on the marketplace. And these are not only rare earths, and they're valuable and hard to get, and therefore important to recycle, but they also, in many cases, are extremely toxic. Chromium. So, that's kind of a complex issue. I can see where the whole industry would start saying, wait a minute, now you're talking about hurting us financially, whereas green power nowadays is going to help us financially. We'll be very happy with that. So what kind of response, what's going on there?
Yeah, it's complicated. The supply chains are definitely complex. Each device can use upwards of 60 different elements from the periodic table, and often in very small amounts. So right now, one of the big challenges is how do you recover such small amounts from so many devices? Unfortunately, our devices, most of them are, like smartphones, are used for around 2 years, and then they're replaced, and those phones, those products, and all of the components they're made up of just end up in the trash, and they're not used, and we're having to mine new inputs. So it is a big problem, but we're hoping that it will become economic to recover those materials as well. Some of the inputs like gold, it has immediate value to recover that and reuse it. As other materials become more scarce, then too, the sector needs to figure out how to recover them. So there are challenges to recovery and recycling, but not so much so that I don't think this sector can can figure out how to do it.
Is recycling yet to the point where it's cheaper to extract rare earth minerals out of recycling than it is to buy them from some cheap mine in Central Africa or in China?
Yeah, that's it right now, from my understanding, no, which is why this problem persists. And each of these elements has its own supply chain. So like they're coming from different places. Like a lot of rare earth are coming from different mines in Russia and China. And then the conflict minerals are coming more from Central Africa. So a lot of work needs to be done among all companies to figure out where these materials are coming from, what the problems are, although we know many of the problems already, but then how to have more transparency and long-term relationships with their suppliers to fix some of these problems.
What can consumers do?
Well, the number one thing we're asking consumers to do right now is to be really conscious about the products that they're purchasing and using, and try to make sure that they first choose a device that is long-lasting, and then use it for as long as it lasts. When it starts malfunctioning, rather than just, okay, ordering a new one, try to repair it. There are repair shops out there, or there's tutorials online you can often find. So just try to extend the life of your devices as long as you can. And then when they really don't work anymore, find a place to recycle them.
Well, and that's the challenge. At home, I've got 4 or 5 old iPhones sitting around. I've got a couple of old computers. I got old hard drives that are, I can't even get cables for anymore. I've been reluctant to dump this stuff because all of it has my data, my passwords and things on it, and I don't know, even though a couple of the iPhones are so dead I can't revive them, I still don't know if there's something still stuck in a flash memory or an EEPROM. How do you, if you're concerned about security and recycling, because I've heard stories about people who left their phones at, turned their phone in, and then somebody in India is logging onto their iTunes address. So what's the advice?
Yeah. So part of we're so there's, unfortunately, when you recycle phones, sometimes they do sort of end up in non-responsible recycling settings where
they go into the gray market or the black market.
Yeah, and workers are exposed sometimes to like pulling apart the different metals, like and like burning them, and it can create toxic fumes. So you do want to send it to a responsible recycler. In the States, we have something called e-stewards, e-stewards, and part of e-stewards commitment is to also clear your data off the device. So they do that. If the devices are still functional, it is a good idea to refurbish them rather than recycle them down to their components. So that's something that e-stewards would look into if that's possible. They would clear the data first. I was going to say something else on that. Sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. It happens to all of us. We have a minute, so we're going to hit a break. What can people who are listening or watching right now do to support Greenpeace's IT campaign?
Sure. So right now we have a petition. If you go to greenpeace.org/USA/do-bigger-things, we have a global campaign pushing Samsung, the largest manufacturer of smartphones in the world, to switch to renewable energy. Right now the company uses only 1% renewable energy, and it's manufacturing millions of phones each year. So they have a long way to go. So if you go to that website, greenpeace.org/USA/do-bigger-things, you can sign our petition and send a direct message to the CEO of Samsung right now.
That's great. And Samsung USA, or greenpeace.org/USA is the main website for Greenpeace USA, right?
Yes.
In fact, I just brought it up on my computer. It's an amazing site. There's all kinds of cool stuff on here.